My father called me from a jail phone while I was 8,000 miles away in the desert and told me somebody was framing him for stealing from a bunch of schools. And 5 hours after my boots hit the ground back in Omaha, I already knew he was telling the truth. I knew who did it. And I made up my mind right there in that cold parking lot that I was going to tear the whole thing down to the ground. Hang with me for 1 second before I take you into it, because I don't say this near enough. It honestly means the world that you clicked on me today. So here's my one ask. Put the name of your city down there in the comments, wherever you're sitting right now, and I'll read it out loud myself when I open up the very next story. I go through every single one. And if you've got it in you, a like and a subscribe are the whole reason a little channel like mine gets to keep going. Okay. So, my dad's name is Frank Novak. He's 62, and he has run a heating and cooling company on the west side of Omaha for 31 years. Since before I was born, out of a metal shop building off Q Street near 96th. The kind of place that smells like cut copper and coffee that's been on the burner since 6 in the morning. Novak Mechanical. He put that name on a truck when he was 31 years old with 2 guys in a used van. And he grew it into a real company, 14 trucks, service contracts all over Douglas and Sarpy County, and he did it being the most boringly honest man you will ever meet in your life. My dad is the guy who drives back to a customer's house because he thinks he overcharged them $11. That's who we're talking about here. Hold on to that. My mom, Sharon, she passed 4 years ago. Ovarian. It went fast. Faster than anybody wanted. And after that, it was just me and Dad. She used to run the office side of the company. The books, the phones, the little things nobody notices until they're gone. And when she died, a piece of the whole operation kind of died with her because Dad's a wrench guy. He's a job site guy. He does not know a spreadsheet from a hole in the ground, and he'll tell you that himself. So a year after Mom passed, Dad took on a partner. And I want you to remember that word, partner, because it's about to mean something ugly. Kyle Brandt, younger guy, early 40s, real smooth, firm handshake, remembered your kids' names. He bought into the company, put in some money, and he took over exactly the part my mom used to run. The office, the books, the bidding, the banking. Dad kept the crews and the trucks and the actual work, and Kyle handled the paper, and everybody said what a great fit it was. My dad, most of all. Dad loved this guy. Called him a godsend. Said Kyle took a weight off him he'd been carrying alone since Mom got sick. Meanwhile, I'd joined the Nebraska Army National Guard right out of high school, and about a year and a half ago, my whole unit got the word we were deploying overseas. 9 months, a base in a part of the world I'm not going to name, hot as the surface of a stove, dust in your teeth. Not the kind of place where your phone works great. Dad and I would talk on video when we could, usually Sunday nights his time. And he'd hold the phone too close to his face the way old guys do and tell me the crews were fine, the trucks were fine. Kyle had them lined up on a big new contract with Omaha Public Schools, servicing the furnaces and the air units across a whole stack of school buildings. Dad was proud of that one. A city contract. Steady money. He said it like it was the thing that was finally going to let him breathe. Here's the part that guts me now, looking back. About 6 months into my deployment, my dad had a heart scare. Chest pains, the whole thing. And because he trusts doctors up at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester more than anybody here, he drove himself up there, 3 hours across Iowa and into Minnesota, and they put a stent in him. And I couldn't be there. I found out about it 4 days later on a Sunday video call. Him sitting in a recliner looking gray and small, telling me not to worry, telling me he went alone, and it was no big deal. My dad had heart surgery by himself while I was on the other side of the planet, and he didn't even tell me until it was over, so I wouldn't fret. That's my father. Write that date down in your head. The stent. It comes back, and when it comes back, it changes everything. Now here's the day my life split in half. It's a Thursday. Middle of the night for me, cold desert dark, and I get pulled out of my rack because there's a call routed through for me, and it's my dad, and his voice is wrong. My dad's voice is a low, steady, calm thing, always has been. This voice was shaking. He goes, "Son, I need you to listen and not talk. They arrested me today." And I'm standing there in my shorts, in the dark, going, "What? Arrested? Arrested for what?" And he says, "Theft. Forgery. They're saying I stole from the school contract, hundreds of thousands. They walked me out of my own shop in handcuffs in front of the whole crew, in front of 2 people from the school district who were there for a walkthrough. They put me in the back of a car. I spent the night in the Douglas County Jail, Danny. Your father spent a night in jail. And the whole time he's telling me this, I can hear it underneath his words. This thing I had never once heard in my father, in my entire life. Shame. He was ashamed. Like some part of him was already half believing that if the whole world said he did it, maybe he was a criminal after all. And then he said the thing. He said, "Son, I swear to you, on your mother, I didn't do this. Somebody did this to me. Somebody's framing me, and I don't know how to fight it, and I'm scared. I have been shot at. I've had rockets come in close enough to feel in my chest. Nothing has ever put ice in my blood, like my father saying the word scared." I told him, "Dad, don't say another word to anybody. Don't sign anything. I'm coming home." And that's when it started. But honestly, you have no idea yet how deep this thing went. Getting home from a deployment early is not like booking a flight. But my first sergeant, a man I will owe until I die, worked the phones and got me emergency leave. And I burned through. I don't even know how many hours in the air. A base in the Middle East, to Germany, to the East Coast, to Omaha. 30-something hours. Sweat-soaked and stinking and running on gas station coffee. Still in uniform because I didn't have time to change. I left a place where it was 110 degrees, and I walked out of Epley Airfield into a Nebraska cold snap. Dirty snow shoved up along the curbs, wind coming off the plains like it had a grudge. My dad was there to pick me up because he'd been let out on bond, and when I saw him across that parking lot, I almost didn't recognize him. He'd lost weight. He looked hunched and old in a way he never had. And this proud man, this man who taught me you don't cry in front of people, he grabbed me in that lot and he broke down against my shoulder, shaking, saying, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to come home for this. I want you to understand something. I did not fly across the entire world to hug my dad and cry. I mean, I did that. But that's not why I came home. I came home to work." So, right there in the truck in the airport parking lot, before we even pulled out, I said, "Dad, tell me everything. Start at the beginning." And he laid it out. And my brain, the part of me the Army trained to find the thing that's wrong in a pattern, that part woke all the way up. Here's what they had on him. Over about a year, Novak Mechanical had paid out around $340,000 to a supply company called Cornhusker Fabrication and Supply. Invoices, purchase orders, checks, all of it. And Cornhusker Fabrication and Supply was a fake, a shell. It didn't fab anything. It didn't supply anything. It was a bank account and a rented mailbox. The money went in and it vanished. And the paperwork, the approvals, the checks, they all carried my dad's signature. His signature approving payments to a fake company he supposedly set up to loot his own contract with the schools. And the man who supposedly discovered all this and reported it, the honest partner who went to the authorities heartbroken about his old friend, was Kyle Brandt. I asked my dad one question. I said, "When did they say these payments got approved? Give me the dates." And Dad pulled out this folder his lawyer had given him, hands shaking, and he started reading me dates. and one of them stopped my heart. Because one whole batch of those approvals, 3 big ones, they were signed and entered into the company system on days in the middle of last winter. And I did the math in about 2 seconds, because I would never forget those days as long as I live. Those were the days my father was flat on his back at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, 3 hours away, getting a stent put in his heart. He didn't sign anything in an office in Omaha those days. He was sedated on a table in another state. I had been on a video call with him from the desert that week, watching him look gray in a recliner. I looked at my dad and I said, "Dad, you were at Mayo. You were getting your heart worked on. You couldn't have signed these. This is fake. All of it is fake." And that was it. 5 hours. 5 hours after I landed, sitting in a cold truck at the airport, I knew for a fact my father was innocent. And I knew there was exactly one man who had the keys to the books and the bank and the ability to make my dad's name appear on paper he never touched. Now I just had to prove it to people who'd already made up their minds. First thing Monday, I went with my dad to his lawyer. Her name is Diane Prokop. Sharp, mid-50s, does defense work out of an office downtown near the courthouse, and I liked her right away because she did not sugarcoat one thing. She told us straight. She said the county attorney's office thinks this is a clean case. Business owner, access to everything, his signature on the paper, money to a fake company, stealing from a public school contract. She said, and this part I'll never forget. She said, a jury is going to walk in that room and see a man who stole from school children, and they are going to want to convict him before you say a word. Then she slid a piece of paper across the desk. She said, the county attorney has already floated a deal. Plead to a reduced felony, pay back the money, probable probation, maybe a little time. And she said, Frank, I have to tell you honestly, on the paper, as it sits right now, this offer is not a bad one. And I watched my father, who had never in his life taken a shortcut or ducked a bill, I watched him pick up that pen. His hand went for the pen because he was tired and he was ashamed, and a part of him just wanted the nightmare to stop. I put my hand flat on the paper. I said, Dad, you didn't do this. You do not confess to a thing you didn't do. And I told Diane about the Mayo dates. She went still. She said, You're sure? I said, I was on a video call with him from overseas that week. I have the call. He was in Minnesota. She wrote it down. Slow. And she said, if we can prove he was physically at Mayo on the days those approvals were entered, that's a crack. That's a real crack. But then she said, the thing that dropped the floor out again. She said, the problem is the county attorney will argue he could have pre-signed blank approvals or signed them later and backdated them. A signature alone doesn't put him in the building on the day. We need more than the dates. We need to put Kyle Brandt's hands on it. So the alibi wasn't enough. I had a crack. I needed a crowbar. That's when I went to see Tomas. Tomas Herrera has been a lead installer at Novak Mechanical for 11 years. He's from South Omaha. He came up under my dad. My dad went to his wedding. And if you ask Tomas about my father, his eyes get wet. I found him at the shop, and I said, Tomas, I need the truth about Kyle. All of it. Whatever you've got. And this man reached under the bench seat of his work truck and pulled out a shoebox. Inside that shoebox was a year of a good man not being able to sit still. Photos he'd taken on his phone of pallets of copper and equipment getting loaded out of the yard on Saturdays for jobs that weren't on the schedule. Side jobs Kyle was running off the company. Screenshots of a crew group text where Kyle told the guys to bill their hours to the school district job even when they were working somewhere else, padding that contract to hide the money going out the back. And Tomas told me something that made my hands go cold. He said, your dad's office. The light was on late a lot of nights. and it was Kyle in there, at your dad's desk, on your dad's computer. I seen him. More than once. I said, "Tomas, is there any way to prove that? Any way to show Kyle at that desk?" And Tomas smiled a little, and he pointed up at the corner of the shop ceiling. And there was a camera. My mom put those cameras in, years ago, for the inventory because the yard kept getting hit. There were cameras on the yard, the shop, and the hallway that ran past the offices. If those cameras caught Kyle at my dad's desk on the nights those approvals got entered, this whole thing was over. I about ran to the office to pull the footage, and this is where they tried to bury me. Because when we got into the recording box, it was empty. Wiped. The last 30 days is all it had. Everything from the winter. Gone. Somebody had gone in and cleared it, and only one person had the password to that system besides my dead mother, and his name was Kyle Brandt. I stood in that little office, and I felt the case slide right through my fingers. The one thing that could put Kyle at the desk. Gone, and him the only one who could have erased it, and no way to prove he did, because erasing it just looks like normal old footage falling off. And it got worse, because Kyle found out I'd been talking to Tomas, and Kyle, who was still legally half-owner and still running that office, called Tomas in and closed the door. I don't know every word, but I know the shape of it, because Tomas came to me after, and he couldn't look at me. Kyle told him the crew's jobs weren't guaranteed, and then Kyle mentioned, real casual, that Tomas's brother-in-law, who worked on the crew, might want to make sure all his paperwork was in order, with immigration and all in times like these. A threat, dressed up nice, but a threat, aimed at a man's family. And Tomas, who had 11 years and a mortgage, and people depending on him, went quiet on me. He didn't take back what he'd shown me, but he stopped answering my calls. And I couldn't even be mad at him, because Kyle had found the exact soft spot and pushed on it. I sat in my dad's kitchen in Millard that night with the shoebox and a cold cup of coffee, and I felt, for the first time since I landed, like maybe I couldn't do this. My dad was asleep down the hall. He was going to go to trial and lose and go to prison at 62 with a bad heart for something he didn't do, and the man who did it was going to end up owning the whole company. And I flew across the world for nothing. I want to tell you I had some brilliant plan in that moment. I didn't. I just sat there. And then I looked at that camera app on my dad's tablet, the one for the shop cameras, and I thought about my mother. Because here's the thing about my mom. She did not trust technology to keep anything. She backed up everything twice. She was the kind of woman who kept the receipt for a toaster for 9 years. And when she set those cameras up, all those years ago, I had this itch of a memory, of her at the kitchen table telling my dad she'd set it. So the video also saved up to some account so we'd never lose it if the box in the shop broke. A cloud account. My mother, 4 years in the ground, might have set those cameras to save a second copy somewhere Kyle never even knew existed, because Kyle came along a year after she died. He wouldn't know. He couldn't know. I tore that house apart looking for a login, and I found it in my mom's old address book, the paper one, in her handwriting, a page in the back where she wrote passwords because she didn't trust the computer to hold them. An account under her email. I typed it in with my heart going like a drum, and it opened. And it was all there, every night, going back years. Nobody had touched it because nobody living knew it was there, but me. I found the nights those approvals were entered, and I watched, on a laptop in my dead mother's kitchen, the hallway camera at Novak Mechanical, time stamped, on the exact nights, and there was Kyle Brandt letting himself into my father's dark office, alone, at 11 at night, sitting down at my dad's desk, at my dad's computer, and working. On the very nights my father was 3 hours away in a hospital bed in Minnesota, with a tube in his heart. I sat there in the dark and I cried. And then I stopped crying because it was time to go to work for real. My mom reached out of the grave and handed me the whole thing. I brought it to Diane the next morning, and I watched a defense lawyer who has seen everything sit back in her chair and go very quiet. She said, "This puts him at the desk on the dates. This is the ball game." And then she said, "But we're going to do this right, because if we just wave a video, they'll say it's doctored. We build it airtight, and we hand it to the county attorney so cleanly they can't say no." So we did. Diane brought in a forensic accountant, a patient older guy named Wendell Pruitt, who looked at money the way I look at a rifle, like he could take it apart blind. And Wendell went into that fake company, Cornhusker Fabrication and Supply, and pulled the thread. The company was registered with the state, and the registered address was a rented mailbox at a shipping store off 84th Street, a mile and a half from Kyle Brandt's house. The online banking for the fake company's account had been logged into over and over from the internet at Kyle's home. And the money that came in, the $340,000, once you followed it past the shell, it moved into accounts that paid Kyle's boat, Kyle's truck, and a bunch of it went to a woman named Renee Doss. Renee was the office manager at Novak Mechanical. She'd been hired by Kyle, and she was also, it turned out, the woman Kyle had been seeing on the side, quiet, for 2 years. And here's the last cut, the one that made my dad put his head down on the table. The company's outside accountant, the certified public accountant who did the books and signed off on everything, and whose whole job was to catch exactly this, a man named Marcus Hale, had gotten a payment too. Traced clean, through the shell, into Hale's pocket. He didn't miss the theft. He was paid to help it hide. So now I had all of them. Kyle, who built it. Renee, who moved the money. Hale, who covered it. And my dad's name on top of all of it like a scarecrow they'd stuck up to take the blame. But I didn't just want it on paper. I wanted them to know it was coming apart, one at a time, in a room, out loud. And that's exactly how it happened. Renee first. Diane and I got to sit down with Renee and her own lawyer, because once Wendell traced money into her accounts, she needed one. And in that conference room, Wendell laid the paper in front of her, the deposits, the dates, and Renee's lawyer leaned over and whispered to her, and Renee's face just came apart. She started crying and she said, the thing people say when the ground goes. She said, "It was all Kyle. He set it up. He told me to move the money. He said Frank would never even notice. I didn't know it would go this far." Diane slid a legal pad across and said, "Then write it down." And she did. Renee Doss flipped on Kyle Brandt in a room I was sitting in, and I watched her hand shake exactly the way my father's hand shook the night he called me from jail. I did not feel one drop of pity, and I'm not proud of that, but I didn't. Marcus Hale was next, and his reckoning was quieter and colder. The forensic file went to the state accountancy board, along with the criminal referral. I heard about the day 2 investigators and a detective walked into Hale's tidy little office with the framed certificate on the wall, the certificate that was supposed to mean he was trustworthy, and they sat him down and showed him the trail. He surrendered his license before they could take it. 30 years of being Marcus Hale, CPA, and it was gone in an afternoon. And every business that ever trusted him got a letter. A man like that, the license is the whole self. They took the whole self. And then there was Kyle. Diane took the entire package to the Douglas County Attorney's office. The Mayo records proving my dad was sedated in another state on the signing dates. The cloud footage, verified, of Kyle at the desk on those same nights. Wendell's money trail from the fake company to Kyle's mailbox, Kyle's internet, Kyle's boat. Renee's signed statement, Hale's payment. And I have to give the county attorney credit here, because once they saw it, they moved fast, and they moved the right direction. They didn't dig in to save face. They dropped every charge against my father, and they charged Kyle Brandt with theft by deception, forgery, and a stack of other things I can't pronounce. Felonies that carry real years. The day they dismissed the case against my dad, we stood on the steps of the courthouse downtown in the cold, and my father, this man who'd been walking around hunched and gray for 2 months, he straightened up. I actually watched his spine come back. Somebody from the school district was there, and they apologized to him in front of people. And later, the district restored the contract and put out a statement clearing Novak Mechanical by name. But the part I'll keep forever is what happened at the shop. See, they arrested my dad in front of his whole crew, walked him out in cuffs like a show, and when they came for Kyle, they came to that same shop, the office he'd taken over, and there were people around, some of the crew, a couple of the school district folks who'd come to make things right with my dad. And I stood in the yard, in the cold, and I watched 2 Omaha police detectives walk into that office and come back out with Kyle Brandt in handcuffs, past the same trucks, past the same men, out the same door he'd sent my father through. Kyle looked at me on his way past, and I didn't say one word. I just held his eyes until they put him in the car, the exact same way they'd done to my dad. Let it land on him the whole ride, I thought. Let it land the way it landed on my father. Tomas was standing next to me. He'd found his nerve again the second he heard my dad was cleared. And when they drove Kyle off, Tomas let out this breath, and he said, "Your mom set up those cameras." And I said, "Yeah." She did, and neither of us could say anything else for a minute. Here's where things landed. Kyle Brandt took a plea rather than face a jury with that footage, and he's doing his years in the Nebraska system, and the buy-in he'd paid into the company got clawed back into restitution for my dad. Renee got probation and a felony, and she moved out of state. The money she took gone to restitution too. Marcus Hale lost his license for good and pled to his own charges. And my father owns 100% of Novak Mechanical, again, free and clear. His name good, the trucks rolling, the school buildings warm. The night it was all really over, I sat with my dad on the back porch of the house in Millard, cold enough to see our breath, a bag of Runza between us because neither of us felt like cooking, and for a long time we didn't talk. And then my dad said, real low, I almost signed that paper. I almost said I did it, and I said, but you didn't, because I put my hand on it. And he reached over and gripped the back of my neck the way he did when I was a kid. And he said, you came home. And that was the whole conversation. That was everything. I flew back and finished my deployment. I did my time downrange, and I came home again. For good this time. And my dad was standing at Epley in the same spot, straight-backed, color in his face, alive. So here's the only thing I really want to leave you with, and it's not clever. It's just true. There are people out there who will do you dirty precisely because they think you're too far away to stop them. Kyle looked at my dad, 62, and grieving and trusting. And he looked at me, on the other side of the planet, and he figured there was nobody home to fight him. He bet the whole thing on nobody coming. He forgot that some of us will cross the entire world to stand next to the people we love. And he forgot the person who was watching over that shop the whole time was a woman who'd been gone 4 years, and still, somehow, saved us. So call the people who matter to you, tonight, whatever the distance is. Because you never know which phone call is the one that ends up meaning everything, and you never know who's quietly kept a copy of the truth, waiting for you to come find it.